Hey, Programming 12. I wanted to talk a little bit about another thing that's important to improve our code, and that is writing some functions to make our code less ugly. I got some ugly code here to show you. This is dense. This is my check for collisions loop that's in the hero class right now, and it works. So then should be my object. Oh no, I guess that should be the size. There we go. It basically works, except that it's so gross. It's so gross. And as I started typing this, and I'm like, well, I guess I'll have to do these. Wait, I was like, no, we got to stop. The madness is gotten too far. And again, we're sort of, trying to code fast and try to get features done. And, we want to make the game come alive. We want to see cool new features. But we're starting to suffer under the weight of our messy code. And the messier it gets, the easier it is for new errors to crop up and for us to make, those careless mistakes or dumb mistakes, sometimes we call them, where it's just, our code's just getting so awkward. It's easy to make mistakes when your code looks awkward. So for example, right now, here's my collision code. I get a game object, which is fine, and I want to then see if that's a bullet. This is the hero class, right? So I'm looking for enemy bullets. And then I have to check to see if that bullet, if it's a bullet, then I check to see if it's in the room with the hero. And if it is, then I have to check the distance between it and myself to make sure it's less than the sum of the radii to know if I'm colliding. And if that's true, then I can go ahead and get damaged and remove the thing. If that's so many levels, that's 4 levels of indentation, right? It's like, well, and including the function itself. So, there's already indented for the function, and then here's another 2, 3, 4 levels of indentation. If you've gone 4 levels deep, there's a good chance you need to simplify your code. So this video is mostly going to be about how I can clean this up and make this look nicer. I want to make this look nicer because I need to do this again, right? I need to not just check for bullets, I have to check for enemies, although actually I have a little trick for that too we'll talk about later on. So how am I going to clean this up? Well, I'd like to write a new function. I want to write a collides with function, some kind of function that determines yes or no, true or false, am I colliding with an object? So I could just call it and give it an object, a game object in particular, and it will tell me like true or false if I'm colliding with it. And then I could simplify at least all this if statement stuff into a single function call. So I need to make a new function, and I'm going to build it into my game object. That way, all game objects will be able to ask the question, am I colliding with this other game object? And that's going to cut down so much of this if statement. So I'll show you what I did. This is in my game object class. So this is something that everything can do, and this is a new function. So check it out. This is a Boolean function. So Boolean functions are functions that return a value, true or false value in particular. Usually we've been writing things like void functions, and they don't really answer anything. They're just a list of things to do. They're just some code that needs to be executed when you call that function. But a Boolean function doesn't just execute a bunch of code, it also returns an answer. So it sort of answers a question. And this question is going to be, is this object colliding with the parameter object? So we'll send it a parameter, and then we'll determine if it's colliding. And we'll also check the room information as well. So not only will we check if the distance is within this, the sum of the radii, but we'll also check if it's in the same room. And we'll package that all up. All that code we kind of get in here. And you'll notice that we're using the keyword return. So if those things end up being true, then we can answer the question as true. And if we're not colliding, we'll answer the question as false. So the story isn't all here yet, but let me just go over the code for this function, and then we can see how to use it, and that'll sort of complete the full picture. So here it is. So again, in game object, we take a game object as a parameter, and we'll just measure the distance between this object, which will be just location x and location y, with that parameter object, which will be this coordinates. And then I'm going to say, oh, am I in the room with my object? And that's another function I'll show you. So if we're in the same room, and that distance is less than the sum of the radii, then the answer is true. Yes, we are colliding. And if that's not true, then the answer is no, we're not colliding. What's this in room with? Well, that's also a function I wrote. It's right here. So in room with is a function that takes a game object as a parameter, and it just checks to see if this object's room x matches that object's room x, and if this object's room y matches that object's room y. So it returns true. It's a Boolean function, so it returns true if that's true, and it returns false if that's false. So I can use this function right here because that can become true or false. It will answer, is this object in the same room with that object? And it will be right in here in this if statement to be true or false. I'll just mention that this is a little clunky, and you could just return this. Instead of saying, if that's true, return true, else return false, you could just say return this. But sometimes people will find that a little weird to wrap their heads around, so either way is fine. So that is also correct, because this is either true or false, so I can just return the results of this Boolean expression. But if you're a little weirded out by that and you prefer an if statement, then that's cool too. You can ask, hey, if this is true, return true. Otherwise, it's false, so return false. I'll leave it up to you to decide. And you can also change this one to do a similar thing if you want to. So these two functions will allow me to simplify that loop that's outside, and any loop that involves collisions. My enemies have collision code in it, so I can use is colliding with in that code. I can just simplify everything. I can just make it so much better. So let's go do it. I'm going to go back to Hero, and let's make that look nice. So I am going to replace this stuff here with basically if this is in the Hero class, so I can say is colliding with, and that'll refer to as the Hero colliding with my object. And I can make that an if statement all on its own. So if it's a bullet, I can check to see if it's colliding with me. And this will result in true or false based on that other function. It'll check to see if we're in the same room, and it'll check to see if it's colliding with it. This is me calling the function. I can simplify this even more. If I don't put in a new if statement, I can get rid of this. I can get rid of that whole if statement. Ooh, a little too much. And I can say, and right there. And I can get rid of a bunch of these braces now. Have to be careful about that because I can end up screwing things up. Yeah, I missed the brace here. There we go. So now I'm only got two levels of indentation. I have a while loop and I have an if statement that says, oh, I guess I had to do it like that. Ha! Parentheses. Is colliding with. Sorry, I named it wrong. There we go. So now I have just a single if statement to say, hey, is this object an enemy bullet and is it colliding with me? Then I will take damage. So I've basically taken those if statements and I've put them in another function so that this while loop can be so much nicer. And hey, if I want to do another thing, like maybe I want to check if I'm colliding with enemies, I can just say if my object, instance of enemy and is colliding with my object. So now I'm, I can make another if statement to check for other types of collisions. And it's so much cleaner and it's so much nicer than that, 4 levels deep of indentation. This will make sure that I make fewer mistakes. And that's what it's all about, right? Like we're all struggling with the weight of our code has sort of become so, heavy. So let's lighten it up. Let's make functions that will reuse these types of things and put them into maybe our game object class where all the objects can make use of them or elsewhere. I'll mention that, things like our enemies, I'm not sure if I've coded that up for the enemy class. Yeah, here's the enemy. Yeah, so I have updated this as well. So notice that in my enemy class now I'm using is colliding with. And I can just call that. It'll check if this enemy is colliding with this object. I'd check to see if it's an instance of a bullet. And I can make this even simpler. I think it would be nice to just go and and then get rid of a brace and go like that. Oh, that looks nice. Hey, that looks so much nicer than that, checking all those other things. And I can just reuse this whenever I want, so anything can check. So hey, that's helpful. Hey, one other thing, you can add more. You can do this yourself. You don't have to wait for me to make those decisions, right? For example, I made an explode method. This function. I made an explode function. Oh, Elaine, tick that up. So the explode function is something that game objects have, and it just causes them to explode, which just means make a bunch of particles. So if I go to game object, I'll show you that. There it is. I have this explode function, so I can just say, hey, make n particles at my location. So I can have any object say explode, and those particles, like I'm just making a whole bunch of explosion little particles. I have a ring too. This looks kind of cool, but it doesn't really matter. I can just tell something to make it instead of having some random loop inside of my collision code to make a bunch of particles and putting that all over the place. Because it's in game, like this is in game object, right? All game objects can now explode. They can all make particles at their location just by calling explode and sending it a number to say, hey, I want this many particles. So hey, you could add more. You can add a whole bunch of stuff. Whatever you're finding is tedious, you could migrate it into a superclass and make that function so you can make your life easier. It's a little bit of extra thinking, but it allows you to be lazier in the long run, and that's our goal, really, for programming. Okay, thanks so much, everybody, for watching the video. Hopefully you can make use of these functions, and hopefully it's clear how to use them, and hopefully you can make some more as well to make your life easier. Okay, thanks so much, everybody.